Hello, I am Başak Özdemir. I am landscape architect with over 25 years of experiences in Turkey in this field. I would like to share my professional experience with you through the concept of empathy. Let me convey the concept of empathy through the parties we work with. 1. Employer and investor. 2. End user, private customer or public user. 3. Or partners in the project process such as architects, engineering groups. Before moving on to these topics, I'd initially like to discuss some of the problems we faced and share our work experiences in Turkey within a broad framework. In our profession, we are confronted with two major threats. The first and the most important one is the climate crisis and drought. Another equally crucial threat is the earthquake. As you know, there is a global climate change happening worldwide, leading to a water crisis in our country as well, especially in the Mediterranean region of the country. However, our country is not only in a geography that has a coast to the Mediterranean. In addition to Mediterranean, we have a climate zone with higher precipitation rates such as the Black Sea and 4 other climate zones with different rates depending on the season. These climate variations significantly influence our approach to work. Clients may have to see the plant diversity of the Black Sea in the Mediterranean zone. These demands are very challenging for us professionally because trying to imitate a Black Sea climate for the flora results in excess need of water. Even if decision makers draw attention to this issue and warn about it, it seems that it will take more time for arid landscape design to be generally accepted, liked, and preferred in societies like ours that learn by living. We emphasize a scientific approach in responding to such demands. When the demand comes directly from the customer, we find it essential to train them, especially on potential issues that may arise and guide them in the decision-making process. Establishing serious empathy with both the employer and the end user is crucial in this design throughout the process of project production. Especially in large metropolises like Istanbul, water scarcity has increased. Consequently, some paradigms need to change. The government is conducting a series of awareness-raising campaigns to inform and educate the public, and municipalities are restricting water supplies in landscape areas. They are obliging us to store and use rainwater for irrigation. However, rainfall in some regions is clearly not sufficient to water lawns, which are high demand from customers. Regulations and laws have started to change, but there is still time for adaptation. Although a good number of steps have been taken to deal with this serious problem, such as conscious water consumption and more efficient usage of rainfall, it seems that it will take more time for widespread recognition of the problem and application of the new regulations. As landscape architects, we are careful about both creating regulations and leading this change. There is a significant difference between the perspective of a private customer compared to an investing customer. The private customer can be more persistent. Turkey is a country with diverse cultural habits in daily life and various regional traditions and customs. In a cosmopolitan city like Istanbul, this diversity is both exciting and challenging. For example, while some of the clients may want a simple design for relaxation and aesthetics, others may request a garden that is just edible. Some may want to engage in agriculture in their garden, while others prefer a garden that is purely ornamental and prefer just to entertain guests in it. Some may desire a garden that remains evergreen with no leaf shedding, while others may ask for a potpourri of all kinds of plant species. We also need to mention that high-end clients tend to have more sophisticated demands, such as the use of art and technology combined with nature in harmony. Apart from my experience in this field, other driving factors of our designs are scientific facts, available data, and the latest trends and styles. The second biggest threat to our profession is the never-ending risk of earthquakes. Due to its location and geophysical aspects, Turkey and Istanbul are always under threat when it comes to earthquakes. Just last year, we had a very devastating earthquake in southern Turkey. A similar earthquake is expected in Istanbul soon. Therefore, satellite cities are established on the periphery of the city, and the population of the city is encouraged to move there. After the 1999 earthquake near Istanbul, steps were taken in this direction. In these projects, Turkish landscape architects designed squares, large city parks, and roads on an urban scale. At this point, empathy with the public authorities became essential in this context. In addition, I want to point out that the population in Turkey is rapidly aging. Our population growth rate is not as rapid as it used to be. With the increase in the elderly population, it is crucial for us to consider their living standards, to establish new standards for the elderly and disabled, and to empathize with the problems experienced by this age group. The topography of Istanbul is quite rugged, full of deep slopes, steep hills, and undulating terrain. The waterway passing through the middle of Istanbul and the steep hills around it highlights the slope problems in landscape areas. In this regard, extensive communication and cooperation with engineering groups is of utmost importance in order to produce solutions. At this point, we also need to consider the comfort of end users, especially the elderly and children. All these are permanent problems in our profession. Landscape architecture is a new profession in Turkey. It can take time for our project partners to adapt to our presence and coordinate with us. So we need to educate them, and they also need to be open with us. If we go back to the beginning, I would like to talk a little bit more about the investor as the first element we need to empathize with. The most important thing for the investor is to add value to his investment, not just in profit, but also in prestige and continuity. Landscape architecture, which was not well understood in the past, has become the most important factor for investors since the 2000s. As a landscape architect, I have been providing professional services in the creation of the site plans, layouts, and location of buildings in the last 7-8 years. The main element here is trust in the relationship with the customer. Trust also ensures the continuity of the relationship. In order to understand exactly what they really want, we conduct detailed face-to-face meetings with all teams, receiving individual requests from each unit: employer, sales team, production team, architects. Each unit may have different requests, and we evaluate these requests along with the results from our past experiences. We explain to them what is and is not feasible. Our main business is serving investor clients, so we have become professionals in this regard. Our project durations can take an average of 1 to 3 years. changes can be made to the project for various reasons during this time. However, since we progress through multiple alternatives in the design phase, we do not experience difficulty adapting to changes. For example, a building planned to be a hotel in Büyükyalı project was converted into a private headquarters. Or in our Vadi Istanbul project, the hospital section was transformed into office blocks. We did not struggle to complete the projects due to the flexibility of our designs. Thanks to the foresight we gained and precautionary steps we envisioned in the initial meetings. And at each stage, we clearly explain what we do and why we do it. Modeling and rendering works gain importance in such projects. Using the right technology has also facilitated the decision-making process a great deal. We provide our customers with the opportunity to navigate through the landscape model using VR technology, which enables them to see and experience the real dimensions of the project, resulting in them a more rational and healthier decision based on a more realistic view of the project rather than their imagination. This also helps customers refrain themselves from requesting unnecessary or unrealistic changes to the project. When it comes to empathizing with the end user can be the customer of the investor, the public of the owner of a private villa or an office. It is not possible to start a project without empathy. We analyze the idea in their minds by asking open-ended questions, special requests based on how, when, how and how long the area will be used, including differences in local and cultural usage, are received and taken into consideration. Then we create the design by combining these with geographical facts and according to their budget. In addition to the work we do in Turkey, especially in Istanbul, we also provide services to neighboring countries. It is very pleasant to work with different climates and cultures. The fact that Turkey is a bridge between the Middle East and the Mediterranean and the Balkans makes it easier for us to do business with countries that are culturally and geographically periphery. We have the opportunity to work with these different cultures. While one of the customers asked for a flamboyant, flashy, and peaceful garden that is completely oriented towards peace in French or English style, another may ask us to design a garden with there is no grass, but full of beneficial plants which serve a purpose or can be used in daily life. In a flamboyant garden, we make a design that can provide mobility in the future, considering possible changes in the upcoming years. We add functional elements that are not visible at that time. For example, we locate vegetable and fruit gardens hidden behind the formal design. In addition, rainwater could be collected underneath the garden. In the garden, which is to be used as edible, we can create the garden as it is just for aesthetics, using edible gardens as hedges or fruit trees as solitaires. For example, the fruit, flower, leaves of all plants in this garden could be also evaluated, and we can achieve nice results as a composition. Interdisciplinary empathy. We work with many professionals such as engineers, architects, sales and marketing teams, manufacturers, installers. When it comes to designing roof gardens or gardens above the car park level of the building, collaboration with the architects and developing a joint design is crucially important. While working with architectural teams, we advise them not to push landscape into background and keep it up to date. Otherwise, if we need to design a rooftop garden after the architectural design is completed, our job becomes much more difficult. In an appropriately planned landscape area, neither the load of the trees the load of the playground equipment, nor the other elements may have been taken into account in static calculations, or when we want to add a pool in addition to an area where the water element was not initially planned, the mechanical calculations may change. In this case, all the work of the teams becomes useless. The same goes for electricity. To prevent material losses and save time, it is essential for us to be involved in the project from the very beginning. If not, we train, inform, and guide our partners about these issues that they might face in future projects. I would like to show some examples of our projects. You can see the 3D renderings and application photos of our project named Fifth Levant here. Now here you can see the application photos of Vadi Istanbul and 5. Levent projects. Our landscape design for the purpose of creating a lakeside renovation and recreation area abroad. Design works of a park project abroad. Our landscape design, which looks like an oasis in the middle of a residential complex of skyscrapers. Design from our project of a large pavilion abroad. Or design of a chalet landscape project abroad. Our landscape design in the common areas of the plant industrial area. Or landscape design of a residential complex abroad. Landscape design of a housing project that is currently being constructed. Landscape design of the housing project located in Beşiktaş, one of the oldest districts of Istanbul. Landscape design of a residential project in Göktürk, one of the new favorite districts of Istanbul. Landscape design of the public garden in Kırıkkale province in Anatolia. landscape design of the public garden in Samsun, one of the most important cities in Turkey. I would like to conclude my presentation with some of our project approach. Dynamic garden design, sequential planting. Three different design languages in the same area for a confused customer. Model works, rendering, and animation works. The construction process and field photos of Büyükyılı and Beyoğlu projects. As the usage of the end user, I would like to show you the video of our Büyükyılı project. Thought the first rule of design is empathy. Good listening, observing, and understanding is essential for analysis. Our first questions must be where, why, when, from who, and how. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anjali. I'm a landscape architect based in Ahmedabad. Going through Bashak's writing and discussion, I sensed an attempt to close a series of gaps from intent to design to communication and to execution, something all of us face in our practice and are attempting to do practically every day. It also reminded me of some passages from Richard Sennett's book, The Craftsman. Every craftsman conducts a dialogue between concrete practices and thinking. This dialogue evolves into sustaining habits, and these habits establish a rhythm between problem solving and problem finding. He, however, also goes on to say in another part that what the process of concrete things reveals to us about ourselves. Learning from things requires us to care about the qualities of cloths or the right way to poach fish. Fine cloth or food cooked well enables us to imagine larger categories of good. Friendly to the senses, the cultural materialist wants to map out where pleasure is to be found and how it is organized. Somewhere this resonated, and it reminded me of a set of other gaps that we navigate, indeed dwell, in the process of placemaking. I will attempt to explain this through three stages of working that most landscape projects go through. The first is the site and context. Second is the process of communicating design. And third is the actual execution of things on site. The first one, site and context. First and foremost, as landscape architects, something that is very important to us in most projects is the site and its physical context. While we deal with varied sites, large, small, flat, undulating, sometimes we come across sites that are out of the ordinary. We assume that a wonderful site means the site or the design will respond to this very interesting location and condition of the site. This, as I discovered, is not true in some cases. One of the projects that we are working on in office, the site is located in a very special place, on top of a small ridge overlooking a large reservoir of water. It's a wonderful site. The reality of the build project is actually very different. Hence, there is a difference between the larger location and context of the site and what is the actual site of the project that you're working on. While you cannot completely bridge this gap between the two sites, the gist of the design process has been to find things and points that can make some connections between the two. The joy in the project has in fact been in dwelling in the thickness of this gap and discovering things that may or may not relate directly to the making of the project. For example, while the site is supposed to be within a high rainfall area, this particular location sees more rainfall than its immediate surroundings. While it is clearly a part of the northern Western Ghats, it lies within some extremely local conditions. Topography is in fact a large bowl, and the site is a local high point within this bowl. Thanks to this, it sees much higher annual rainfall. In terms of vegetation, this part of the northern Western Ghats sees two types of forests: the tropical semi-evergreen on the crest line and the moist deciduous on the eastern spurs. However, during one site visit, we spotted a field of white flowers, which on close inspection clearly were orchids. So these are Habenaria grandifloriformis orchids. They bloom only after the first showers of the monsoon in high altitude grasslands and are supposed to occur in areas that are 1,000 meters and above. Our site is actually around 600 meters. So they were quite a surprise. In Marathi, these orchids are called Ashad Amari or Ashad Amri. Ashad being the first month of the monsoon. Many such discoveries and detours are what brings joy and fun to the process, and projects offer more than one way of making this detour. For example, this is a plant documentation for a site which we were lucky enough to get in before the JCB came. The project never took off, but now we try and do this for as many projects as possible. One more is this map of Ahmedabad, which we were able to get our hands on after 18 months, a map from 1881, only to be able to confirm or only to confirm the location of a garden since a book had passingly mentioned it. Unfortunately, you cannot keep being a vagrant, but have to get down and work to produce some tangible things which others can understand. In this process as well, most of us employ various means and techniques, models, drawings, diagrams, sketches, whatever it takes to communicate. But again, the fun part is when they take on a life of their own, even when they are made collaboratively. Drawing is as much for communication as it is for imagination. In fact, allowing you to create your own layers of things, living with them, and enjoying it. These are drawings that we made for a project in which we are working with a developer who's quite focused on amenities and a USP for selling.
At the opposite spectrum of making drawings, arguably, are planting plants. That is landscape architects, we are all involved in. This is, of course, in most cases, the last set of drawings to be released. These are technical drawings made after much deliberation and finalized after many iterations, nursery visits, checking availability of plants, checking specimens, much like other parts of the build project that require testing, sampling, etc. While working on planting, it is the imagination of the plant life where the mind occupies the space between the intent and the practical parts. One can imagine myriad characters before pinning things down for their actual making. These are collages we've made for an unbuilt project in which it was critical to figure out a sense of the plant material at the conceptual stage itself. In another project, again one with quite a tight garden, a model helped getting the scale and character of the trees correct while finalizing the species. In a dichotomy of sorts, the planting plans translate to the softest yet powerful layer of space making in gardens and landscapes. Whether it is a courtyard with shade and water, an entrance court surrounded with grasses, or a walkway around a garden, a flowering shrub, or a composition of grasses at the edge of a river. These drawings, translated to ground, take on a life of their own and hopefully remind people of other places and other times.
And of course, finally, the last part, the process of execution on site and communicating to the various teams working on the project. Again, while we make several drawings to communicate different things, for setting out levels, quick SketchUp models, whatever it takes to get it done. Unexpectedly, sometimes the connection happens between what you've put together and the site team that finally understands it and strives on their own to get it right. Again, this is the same site in the Western Ghats, and we were making a small amphitheater. The curved steps have a flooring that had one horizontal stone and the rest were vertical strips. This is a contractor who had not really worked with detailed drawings, but by now had made the other part of the plaza with us. And finally, at this stage, he suddenly understood the drawings, figured out the radial pattern on his own, did the marking from the center, and executed it quite well. And while you're occupied with all these layers and gaps of the many things that are part of the project, you catch glimpses of things coming together and the experience recalling the original intent. Again, where did the intent come from? Did the detours help? Some clues are offered in the following sentences from John Dixon Hunt. What the designer works on right here in front of him on his computer or drawing board is also envisaged in this mind, in his own experiences of places elsewhere, in books, notes, and so on, and in its significance or proposed meaning, which does not lie in the work directly in front of him. Thus, the designer's work is near to them, the rest far away. The task is to create a dialogue between them. I would like to conclude by asking if this movement of the mind translates to anything tangible on site. Can it invoke, as a Japanese poet says, many things brought to my mind as I stand in the garden staring at a cherry tree?
Thank you, Başak and Anjali, for your engaging presentations and for bringing this conversation to the table. We haven't actually had discussions around empathy and design thinking in a very long time. I welcome our discussants for the evening, Professor Snehal Nagarse, Dr. Meghal Arya, Mr. Burak Karaca, Ms. Asli Aydugdu, and Ms. Kunjan Garg to share their ideas on the subject. I also welcome architect Aniket Bhagwat, who's joined us today. Pleasantly surprised that he's here. I'm really happy to welcome him. So quickly to summarize, the presentations point that it is crucial for a designer to feel empathetic towards the client, user, collaborators, and the environment or the context within which the project sits, as they have a direct influence on design thinking and possible approaches to ensure a project's success. While being empathetic, they also convey that there is a need to evaluate requests from clients, educate them if necessary, and guide them in decision-making process. It is also hard to miss that a deep sense of empathy towards a community, the environment, depleting resources, or the lack of a resource can influence regulations even at regional scales. The presentations also convey that amid all the exchange, somewhere in between are detours that a designer takes. They aren't deliberate, but these detours often lead us to moments of dialogue, that transcends beyond a project or a client's expectations. So I would like to quickly invite Mr. Burak Karaca, an architect and a frequent collaborator on projects with Ms. Başak, to share a few thoughts on navigating between empathy and discretion while delivering projects. Over to you, Burak.
Hello again, thank you. I would like to thank first these great presentations, both Başak and Anjali. As an architect who designs large-scale projects, especially, I would like to hear more about the ways you work with architects on large-scale projects, and what stages can you involving in projects design process in Turkey, especially.
Are you asking to me or to Anjali?
Yeah, you and Anjali. It's Anjali.
Okay. As you know, we participate in design process during the site plan phases. Usually with the architects we used to work with. Other than we participate to the design process after the site plan is done. We prefer to do it at the beginning, of course. But first we make the hand drawings on paper with the architects during the meetings. We argue about everything on this hand drawings on paper until they get a mess and you don't understand anything while you see on the paper. Then, of course, when we see the paper, we understand what we were talked about during the meetings. Then, after this big brainstorming process, we usually make the hand drawings as a clean stage. For example, I usually use iPad Pro to make these thoughts in hand drawings through Sketchbook Pro or Procreate or sometimes Morpholio Trace. And we change the stage and make the drawings on AutoCAD usually we use AutoCAD, and the tools vary, depend on the scale and depend on the needs. But first, at the first meeting, I usually try to emphasize the last picture of the design of the architect in his mind or in her mind. After that, it seems more easy for me to understand the whole project, even if there is not a model of the building of the site. It is very important to see the picture at the ending picture on their mind. And this is it for me.
Thank you on that. It seems to me that I think you need more convincing, from you need a lot more convincing from a landscape architect to put your idea across to a client. So I just wanted to understand from Anjali, are conversations with landscape architects any different from those with architects, architects and clients? Do we have to be a little more convincing compared to architects?
So between the architects and the landscape architects trying to talk to the client is actually, I sometimes find it easier than trying to convince architects about a lot of things. I mean, I'm also an architect, but that has usually been my experience. Clients, I feel, they do not have any kind of, so it works both ways because they don't have any preconceived ideas about things. They're far more open to ideas coming both from landscape architects and architects. With architects, it's a different struggle. But there are, of course, I mean, you do speak a common language at some level, so it's some things are easier, some not so easy. So, yeah.
Any comments on this, Kunjan? Would you like to add to this?
I completely empathize with Anjali since I do not understand the practice of landscape architecture at all. Except for the pleasure part of it. So, but yes, so I can empathize with the way she was articulating that architects would bring to the table a sort of a preconceived formality. But that's actually also true for architects themselves. I would say that it's very easy to talk to clients sometimes, not all the times, who do not come with a preconceived, a picture in their mind, so to say. And then that gives rise to possibilities at both ends. So when they come that, this is what it is, then that limits, that it immediately directs us as well as designers. So, yeah.
Okay, so I would like to take a question to Meghal ma'am or Professor Snehal Nagarsheth regarding detours that Anjali was pointing towards in her presentations. So does it really, do all projects allow these detours to happen? Or, it is just a designer's chance, or a chance a designer takes?
I think it's a choice we make. The detours, at least from my little practice that I've done, the detours are choices that we make. And I think sometimes I can see Anjali, probably very clearly taking a position and saying, no, we will be doing this. And I can even hear her. Maybe, what do you say, Anjali?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's a combination of your training and your temperament. So it's sort of, it comes from there. And as you work, you sort of, I mean, you are always also in constant search of how do you, come up with different things, new ways of doing things. So it's a combination of various things. Because when you're practicing, sometimes you might end up doing maybe a certain number of similar projects. And then, you try and sort of figure out what you are trying to get out of it or what you think will be able to get out of it. So some of it is also coming from there. So I think it's a combination of a lot of these things that happen while you're practicing.
Any further thoughts on that?
May I add to that question?
Yes.
Question to Başak actually, that she was actually, her presentation was rather humble in the sense that she spoke about so many different players in the process. She's obviously dealing with very, very large projects, and she spoke about the clients, she spoke about the investors, the sales, marketing, architects, the suppliers, and so on, everybody. Yeah, but the role of the self was very underplayed in all of that. So when you're dealing with such large projects, you obviously, and you're saying 1 to 3 years for delivery time, your skills would have to be super sharp to be able to deliver relevance in such varying contexts. Yeah. So what is it that you're doing? That's how it connects to Anjali's detours. What is it that you're doing that informs your design intuition?
The design intuition, I really don't know. It comes from inside of myself, I think. But dealing with people, I think I'm a little bit people person. And I try to understand everything who wants something on the project. And as you said before, especially in Turkey, the sales department has a huge role in this process, because when we start to do the project, they start selling the project in 3 or 4 months, and after that we don't usually see them, and they have to imagine everything what is going to be sold in the future 3 years. It's a very hard job for them, I think. And the investors usually start the project and they finish the project in 3 years. After 3 years, it has to be similar picture that they have designed or imagined in their mind at the beginning. The intuition, I don't know. It's not always the similar projects, but usually the demand is similar in Turkey. If you are dealing with a house complex in Turkey, especially in Istanbul, the demands are changing at minimum in 5 years or so, because in Istanbul the population is very rising, and demands are usually growing, and you try to put every facilities in the area that the end user want to use, and there are trends we used to follow, and usually if we in some point we are in the same page with the sales departments or the end users demands on trends, we manage it. But sometimes our country is a very complicated country, and it's a very joyful country also. But if you're put the facilities or the how can I say it, the major demands in front of everything, trends, aesthetics, everything else, you manage somehow. It depends on your talent, how to you design your project. As I told before in the presentation, you have a project in Mediterranean area, and they want a forest in that area. For example, not a residential, but a resort project, you can imagine. They want you to make a big forest. How can you do that? In this time, I try to make them understand how they and how much they have to put in the project. And when it comes to the budget, everything changes. And then we come in some middle point, and we understand each other, and we try to do for the best for the project, their project, or my project, my design.
Wonderful. So I would like to turn towards Dr. Meghal Arya. So any comments that you would want to add to what Başak was speaking about?
Not only what Başak was speaking, what she showed and what Anjali showed, I love looking at, I only attend these to love it because I love looking at these projects. They're so beautiful. God is with you all. And I happen to be one of Anjali's clients who she fights with. But she quoted a craftsman, Senet, and I'm looking at the extensive work done by Başak. And my question actually always goes towards the making side. And how much of a collaboration with gardeners do your practices have? Because one is, Anjali, you showed the planting plan. You plant the plants and you go. But there is the nurturing of the plant. And there is the shaping of the plant, because what Başak showed as completed landscapes were shaped. They are not growing naturally as they are. They're being shaped to present a certain experience to people, right? And that shaping, is that shaping imagined already and communicated to the people who will do the shaping over a period of time? How does one understand this over a period of time? Because some plants might get shaped faster than the others.
Yes, you're right. We at the end of the project phase, we usually make a documentation how to do the maintenance of the project area. It's like a technical specification of the maintaining process, and usually we declare how what kind of plant how to be shaped in the future. But sometimes after 5 years or 10 years, people want to make some changes in their gardens. I'm talking about the housing complex. There are some firms that they govern how to deal the housekeeping, security, and gardening all together. And they have these specs in their hands, and they know how to shape or how to nutrient or how to maintain every kind of plants or lawns in that garden. Otherwise, if you leave the garden, they can change everything in that garden. Sometimes they prune roses in the wrong way, or sometimes the client wants something else. I just want to this climber climb over the building. It can happen, but it depends on the owner. If it's a private villa or an office, they usually call you and ask you what can we do about it, and we tell them how they can manage it. But if we are talking about a resort or a house complex or an office headquarter buildings, they usually use the specs that we usually prepare for them. And if they really want to make some changes, because sometimes headquarters may change, maybe they sell the firm and another firm comes to that place, and sometimes they want to put their logo in the front of the garden, maybe it happens. They usually call us and ask what kind of changes they're going to make, and they ask help. Otherwise, gardens can be changed because they're living organisms, But I have to add, in Turkey, we usually don't see people that plants are going to be in natural way. We usually tend to shape them. We usually tend to have power on them if the land is ours.
So Do you want to take that to Anjali? I would actually request Asli to comment on this or give her thoughts, because she works in the same region as a landscape architect, same place. Asli, can you share your experiences on this?
Hello.
Hello.
Your presentation were very nice. I want to ask a question to Başak. Over 10,000 natural plant species and around 3,090 endemic plant species grow in Turkey. In a country with such a rich diversity of natural plants, what is your approach to including such natural and endemic species in your landscaping projects, apart from cultivated plant species?
Nice.
Yes. Before Başak takes it, I would like Anjali to respond to that. And then we can take it to Başak.
The previous question?
Yes.
Yeah, so I would agree with Başak. It's a process. Depends on the owner, depends on your relationship that you've managed to build with the client, the gardener, everyone. And it's a long process. So sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't go well, but that process does take. People call you after 5 years, 10 years and ask you to sometimes replant certain areas. All that happens. So that's part, I think, of most landscape projects. That's definitely a part.
In the public gardens, it's a different story.
Yeah.
I experienced that after 10 years, the public garden takes its name, and people used to use that public gardens. And after 10 years, you can see the plants are growth and the shrubs are flowering, and they used to see as a natural site that I used to say before. And they don't touch it and they respect it because they don't own the public parks. But in the meantime, the municipalities sometimes change regulations and they decide not to use loan in the parks, and they start giving irrigation to the irrigation system waters, and that's another story. But for example, when the homeless population is growing, they start to cut all the shrubs from the public gardens because they don't want people hiding in the back of the shrubs because of the security concerns. In the meantime, when you see a big shrub, they're trying to prune as a tree because they want to see what's under the shrub. And after 20 years, you see the park in a different way. But you understand that the park is living as you do.
Architect Aniket Bhagwat is here, so I would like him to add something to this. Do we design for 5 years or do we design for a longer span or posterity? What are the cases that we look at?
I think at some level, there are two things. I mean, many things have been said today, and all of them sort of thought-provoking. There are two things that come to my mind when I particularly listen to Başak, and a little bit when I listen to Anjali, of course, I know very well. I think the business of putting together work, whether it's architecture or whether it's landscape design, and just the processes that go into it preoccupy us so much because the realization is difficult in all countries, I think, whether it's Turkey, whether it's India, any other part of the world. I think realization of a landscape project or an architectural project is always fraught with a series of challenges that you will face on the way. And I think they consume us greatly. And very often, because they consume us so much, along the way, I think we forget why we are doing this project in the first place. And I believe very strongly that the genesis of why we want to do something, the poetic abstraction that I think matters to us, is something that we must hold on to and learn ways of holding it out throughout. So, I mean, I think this is, to me, the big thing. And as you know, I've always said that projects are opportunities to tell stories. They are opportunities to tell stories that you want to tell, much like Anjali and Başak were talking about. But there are also opportunities to tell stories that you want other people to read or other people to understand. And I think these stories have to transport people into another space, into another place. Largely because if you keep talking about like the kind of thing that Basak was talking about, whether it is fires, whether it's earthquakes, whether it's a certain sort of concern about what's happening with climate change and so on and so forth, we all want a better future, a safer future. And if we want it, then we will have to, in our work, demonstrate the possibility of taking and transporting people to another place in time, or at least get a sense of what that another place is. And I think this is absolutely important. I've said this often. I can't say it, with any less vehemence. I think we have to become storytellers first. We have to hone our skills at telling stories, and we have to be able to tell stories that are personal, but also stories that are relevant to different ideas of time and society. The other thing that you, of course, said, whether we design for 5 or 10 years, I think that you have to see gardens as the making of a body. And all you can do, or all anybody can do in the making of the body, is to strengthen the bones, because, they will stay. And if the bones are strong, if the bones are well formed and the flesh sort of decays, the next time around when somebody comes, they will recognize these bones and they will begin to find out ways in which to put in the flesh back so that the bones are expressed. The great thing about gardens is that it's not a singular animal. It's an animal that keeps changing and transforming. So it's not the skeleton that gets started. It starts with something else, and 10 years later, it becomes something else. Another 10 years, it becomes something else. So as an entity, it keeps changing. But the cohesiveness, the identity, the articulateness of that entity can only be strengthened by the idea of the bones. So what everybody needs to do is to make sure that you're strengthening the bones while there are pleasures of the flesh. And if you're not careful about this, the flesh will always decay. That's the nature of the world. The flesh will decay, it'll go, it'll regenerate. But if the bones are strong, and we've seen this in different gardens, whether it's the Mughal gardens or gardens where there's large stately trees, those really become the bones of the project. But so it's not about time. Yeah.
Thank you for those words. And I would actually like Snehal ma'am to comment on it, because she is in and out of a classroom as well. So how does this play out in a classroom as against, when you're out of a classroom and actually dealing with a real client, a real project? What is the difference? How does one navigate?
I don't do real projects anymore, Aparna. So I'm only in the classroom. I only deal with what can be, what could be. So it's not the real at all. But I do feel that somehow, maybe because it takes very long for things to grow in Ahmedabad, I feel that the time concept that we have over here is, in my opinion, much, much longer. Even a shrub takes so long to grow. So 5-10 years is, I think, a young garden. So unlike how Basak sees it, she kind of looks at it in a rather complete sense with all the blooms. I think the relationship we tend to have with the garden is very tenuous, very, 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 very fond nurturing that needs to happen over here. And that's why I think for us, garden is really... Yes, please.
When I work with elderly people, it's much easier because they just want to be connected with their garden in Turkey. But usually in Turkey, when you work with younger people, just married, maybe with a little child in their hands, they usually focus on their needs. They just not want to bond with the plants. But after some age, I think it's 60, I might very near to that. They really just want to be with their garden and with their plants, and with a connection, maybe we talk to them, maybe in reality, sometimes they become gardeners of their own garden, their garden. And I think in time, when we get older, we appreciate this bonding with our garden. But in public gardens, it's a different story. As Mr. Aniket told before, if the bonds are okay, when you go in Europe, in London or in Paris, you see all the old gardens just as protected or designed at the beginning, but you don't see the flowers between or under the boxwood. In the beginning, they were just the boxwood shapes were just for the flower beds, but now we appreciate just the boxwood because they're shaped very naturally, and we feel okay and not okay. We feel very happy when we see the oldest pine trees or ayaskulus trees or linden trees, and we appreciate it because they are very old, and they are identified the place they are built in. We just understand when we see a linden tree, that's the linden tree. It's more than 100 years old, and that's the place's identity that linden is.
True.
And this, as we talked about before, it's about age.
Right.
Aging is good.
And yes, appreciation comes very easily towards a lot of things that impart some identity. So I would like to take one question. It's very interesting, and I thought I'll just throw it here. So there's an anonymous attendee who's asking us, how do you deal with polar different ideologies between architects and landscape architects? So here we are being pitted against each other. So anybody who wants to take that question? If architects and landscape architects don't agree while they're collaborating, they have very different ideologies.
Ideology
Yeah.
between architects and landscape architects. When I was a student, one of my professor told me, thinks this way. Architects want to see their building from the garden, and you have to make the garden how it seems from in front of the building. In this regard, maybe you can understand with each other, because they usually they want to see the facade, and on the side they want to see the building, and they always as a falcon they used to see from the upside or in the front of the building. They manage how to see that building, how it's look like at the beginning. I'm not talking about the architects that I'm used to work with now.
I know Kunjan wants to answer. Kunjan wants to take that.
I'm not saying anything. Aniket has raised his hand though.
Okay.
And I was just saying that the question is interesting because you can have architects who've got a very diametrically different way of looking at things, and so can a landscape architect looks at it very differently. But at some level, it's a societal question, right? It's a question about whether we can live by having very different viewpoints, very different ways of looking at the world. And I think fundamental in that is there respect? Because if there is respect, and you can have very, very different opinions, then it's equivalent to two people with dramatically different opinions being able to sit in a room and talk to each other. And I think that's very, very interesting, because I've always maintained that, it's unfortunate that landscape architecture is called landscape architecture. It sort of ends up making it seem as if it's a subset of architecture, but it's not. It's a completely different discipline. And it has its own ways of expressing itself. It has got its own tenets. Architecture does too. And these are two very, very great disciplines that come together. Nobody is subservient, and they need to talk to each other. And the more disparate their ideas are, the more different their ideas are, so long as there is respect, I think the quality of the conversation can be great. So I think it's absolutely fantastic if people have very, very different ways of looking at things, so long as they're willing to talk. Sorry, Kunjan, you were saying something.
No, I wasn't really, but it kind of there is, I think, implicated there is also this which has come out in the range of work that both of them have spoken about, both Başak and Anjali. Anjali did not really show it quite that way, but then I know through her practice that she practices in both those realms. Like Başak was quite explicit in saying high-end clients, you know, where you're talking about preferences and demands, so to say, that are made. And on the other hand, she's also talking about public gardens. And I'm sure both Anjali and Başak have worked in a realm where essentials are more important than preferences. And I think if your approach to, I think the conflict between architects and landscape architects, yeah, I don't know how else would you call them, Aniket? It's yeah, I know, but you know, I think the conflict would happen only when the notion of essentials is compromised. Otherwise, otherwise there should not be a conflict. So yeah, but Anjali, what do you?
No, Kunjan, just to interrupt, I think we have to begin to accept that the notion of essentials can differ very differently for different people. And I think that you have to begin to understand this. The moment you subscribe to the idea that there is a common platform of essentials, that pretty much means that we are willing to look at the world in a singular manner. And in reality, that's not true. That's not true. For everybody, essentials mean something else. And I think it is so long as you respect these different ideas of essentials and you're willing to talk about it, that something will happen. What you're talking about is the equivalent of conscripting somebody. That because these are what I define as the notion of essentials, and if you agree, you're conscripting, and now let's walk together. I think it is the difference of it. Yeah. That really makes
I did not mean to be prescriptive, but I did mean to say that there is a common minimum program, which is like what it's the world we are living in. It's a closed system, you know. Anyways, yeah, Anjali, please.
No, I think it's about the conversation you can have, and that varies, you know, there are degrees to that. I've never really had that word conflict is probably not right. You do manage to talk to most people. It just depends on how much common sort of ground you can find between the architects, you working on the project, and the client's requirements and all of that. So but it's never really like a conflict between ideologies. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as that.
Anybody wants to add to this? Any more comments?
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for the two presentations. We are talking about the conflict it may be between architects and landscape architects. I have my own, thoughts about that because I'm an architect. I'm doing building design and also landscape architect. Once an architect design their building, they somehow have in their mind, the gardens, so that they can make use of the gardens. From the kitchen, from different windows, if the architects, landscape architects, always the one who come later, when everything's set, the building is already built, designed, and agreed. So most of the time, we come very late at the construction procedures. Do you think that, there's limited freedoms for the landscape architects, or maybe the impact of landscape architects upon the project would be very limited, especially once we regard to climate change, etc. It's the big issues, and if it's only for the gardens, beautiful, ornamental, we cannot do anything, or we cannot contribute so much, to that broader context. And again, you're talking about transformation, not just because of the client change, but also, different context and economics. We don't have money to maintain because it's so expensive, for example, or maybe, politically, for example, most of the statues of the will be destroyed because it's so political. Once, the sculpture or the statues were destroyed, in Russia, in many communist countries after the 1990s, the public landscape surround would be also changed. So how the ideas of recycled material, recycled plants, how we can use those in different projects, like architects. You already think about sustainable design and cradle to cradle. Do we have any models of landscape design that make use the unwanted materials and plants? And my last concern is about the faunas. We're talking more about blue and green. I see colors, but ecological system only fully service once we have, the richness or the diversities, how, plants and different plants and waters can bring animals, insects, causing, useful one. And so would you have any idea, to bring it or to bring them in your design at all, especially, in public garden or private residential landscape design? So the three things.
I just want to answer the last question. First of all, you have to argue with the owner of the garden if they want to attract birds or any kind of plants or insects in their garden. And if they want to use some kind of plants that attracts bees, for example, and the owner is allergic to bees, it's a very big problem. That's why we, at the beginning, we have to inform them about the plants we select for the project design. But in public gardens, everybody knows that, for example, that in May, the plane trees are having pollens, and if you have allergic to the pollens, you don't go outside because it's your own problem. But if you're having your own garden and you don't want any kind of plant that have pollens that you are allergic to, for example. And as you said before, the economical problems we struggle now in our country now. Everything's changed, but to maintain the garden, you can make some changes, not changing everything. For example, you can put out the lawn or the turf on your garden, and you can keep your brushes and roses, for example, your hedges. One of my clients began to be a gardener of her own garden after 65 years old of age, and it depends. As I said before, it has to be needs, and I think gardens also şey yapmak mı isteniyordu ya? Eşlik etmek. It's accompanying the history of our lives and also the lives of the countries.
Sure.
But if they put out the sculpture, they don't touch any kind of trees in the garden or in the public garden, And they sometimes the grass are changing every time. Sometimes it snows, sometimes it doesn't rain. Everything changes, but they don't touch to the trees.
Yes, now I think times are changing and people want their gardens to be more productive. And I think Anjali I would like Anjali to add something to this, the manner in which she works and engages with clients.
Yeah, so in my experience also things are changing. In fact, sometimes the clients are asking you a lot of these questions. They begin to ask you whether there'll be birds, there'll be animals, fauna. So, I mean, not everyone, but definitely clients are also getting more aware about a lot of these things.
There was a question from Aslı about the endemic plants. I don't hear you, Aparna.
There's a
Aparna,
question.
you're on mute.
There's a question from
Aslı about the endemic plants in Turkey.
endemic.
Maybe
Yes.
endemic. And maybe Anjali could answer about your own country, your country.
So, so I'm sure, I mean, you know, it's fairly complex because given the history, there is a whole mix of plants that are now used in gardens.
Yes.
So from like we have plants from South America, Mexico. I think there are some even from North America that managed to survive in this semi-arid climate that we are in.
Important.
Yeah, so but there is also compared to 5 years ago, I would say there are a lot many native plants now that are also available to use. So
Really?
yes, compared to let's say 5 years, it's a slow process. It's happening. So it's again, it depends on, you know, so that is also a collective process. So if over a period of time people have been asking for things, then you know you do begin to see that change. And now whether you can use them in our projects is a completely different story. Because one is, you know, just the fact that they're available. Second is how do you sort of choose the palette of plants for different projects? So if it's a very
And
small garden, you mean there's a limited range that you will work.
yes. And also, some
it's
kind of endemic plants are not going to live in the changed habitat. If you change the habitat,
yes,
if you
yeah,
put the same plant in the same area in a different project, they don't live.
yes. So
And
it's
yes, I'm sorry.
no, so I was just saying that, you know, there is also a certain contrast in the fact that you are actually, you know, I think Turkey also, it's a fairly semi-arid environment, less water, all of that. And the entire purpose and the way a garden is made is very different. You're irrigating, you're cultivating. So it's a lot of plants are not going to survive that kind of irrigation, that kind of environment. And that's the environment you actually need for a garden. So it's, you know, it's not a straightforward answer in that sense.
As the same in Turkey, we have a very diversity of endemic plants in our country in different places of our country, and sometimes they ask to maintain or use the same endemic plants in the project, and we explain them it's impossible because you excavate this year and you plant the plants maybe 3 years after, and meanwhile you have to put the plant in another kind of nursery, and in that habitat it will not live. Even if it lives, when you put this in your project, sometimes it doesn't. And this is a very big problem in our country because we are losing the diversity of the plants in our country because we're damaging the lands. This is a major problem. But because of the spreading of the living areas and because of the agriculture also, and not because we are making landscape design, but also agriculture is a big threat for the endemic plants. It's the same, it depends on the laws to maintain them in their places and keep them alive.
Right. Thank you, Başak. I think it's time for some last set of comments. Anyone?
I'm done.
Snehal ma'am, Aniket sir.
No, I think Aparna, you should summarize. I think this is a fantastic beginning. Truly, because I love the passion and I love how everybody sort of wants to talk about this. It's so close to Basak and to Anjali and everybody. Clearly, it's a profession that, you know, the more we think we know it, the less we know it. and how do we navigate through this profession each day, and how do we start making it relevant as one of the most powerful spatial disciplines that can exist. Because as you know, compared to a lot of other spatial disciplines, landscape architecture continues to be one which is not so strongly controlled by a policy or guidelines or rules or even programmatic requirements in the manner in which a building is. And as a result, the canvas that is available is so large. And of course, it pervades every sphere of our life, whether it's on the streets, whether it's in the homes, whether it's in public parks, and so on and so forth. And I think the more we talk, and like today was a great beginning, the more we talk, the more we sort of have our minds to be jogged a little bit, reminded also as to why we are in this profession. I think it's a very important thing. So thank you very much. I mean, thank you, Basak. Thank you, Anjali. Thank you, Aparna. Thank you, Vaidi. Thank you, everybody. I think this is a great beginning. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think we've had a wonderful evening. And I think a lot of times I personally feel it's a given that a landscape architect is a good problem solver. A lot of times you're seen like that. But what is important for a client or an architect or a collaborator is to understand that we are even better at foreseeing problems, and we will be able to help mitigate them if brought in on time. So that is something I just thought I would like to share. Thank you, all discussants, for your insights and very thoughtful sort of perspectives. They have really enriched the conversation today. Thanks, Başak and Anjali, for your willingness to share your experiences and engage in this dialogue today. And it's quite memorable. It's been a memorable session for me, at least. And thank you, everyone. We are happy you took time on a Saturday evening to join us. And we look forward to having you for our next session on technology and AI on the 9th of March at 4:30 p.m. Registration links will be up soon.
Yes, they will be up by later tonight. So please do join us. Please do register and join us for more conversations like this. Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Asli. Thank you, Ms. Başak. Thank you, Kunjan. Thank you, Anjali. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Happy weekend.
Bye.
Bye.